A couple of weeks ago, I put out a video looking at how time works in J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth. The YouTube algorithm being what it is, that's never a video that's going to do particularly well in the summer and from a channel that doesn't focus on Lord of the Rings. That's irrelevant to me though. I'm all about making content I enjoy making. So when I saw a comment talking about how time works in the 40k universe, I thought, you know what, I'm definitely doing that. As I just started a playthrough of the definitive edition of Dawn of War, I thought I would include some imagery of my campaign in the background of this piece. It seems fitting. I'm awful by the way, so set your expectations low. Before we get into it, I would just say that while I've painted a few miniatures, albeit mostly from the Lord of the Rings set, played a few games and watched some of the video content, I am not even close to being an expert on Warhammer and would never claim to be. If you are, and you want to correct or add to anything I've said here, then by all means do so in the comment section below. If you're a regular viewer wondering what on earth you've just tuned into, this video will cover what it says in the title, how time works within 40k. But to keep things relevant, we're also going to look at Warhammer themed timepieces to see if there have ever been any good ones worth considering. If all that sounds good to you, let's get into the video. I think it's important to start with context about Warhammer 40k because it's very different from Middle-earth, which was one man's vision. The first Warhammer 40k book, Inquisitor by Ian Watson, released in 1990, and since then over 1,000 novels, short stories, ebooks and various other fictional works have been published, with this content released and managed by a division of Games Workshop called the Black Library, which, let's be honest, is an awesome name. But anyway, the point is that across those works of fiction, over 60 authors have contributed, and some of the work is considered more canonical than others. And that's only covering written media, never mind anything else. The point being that some things are hard to be definitive about. A good example of this is the question of whether or not the 40k universe is a future version of our own. The 40k timeline begins, for mankind at least, with the Age of Terror. Man lives on Earth and works its way through ancient civilization through to space travel. Occasionally references are made to real-life events or organisations, but is it the same world as our own? That part is up for debate, at least to my knowledge. This, what is and what isn't canon, becomes problematic, especially with interactive media with multiple endings. At this point, we could talk about the Dark Age of technology, the Age of Strife, the Age of the Imperium, the Horus Heresy, or any of the other events that lead up to the 42nd millennium, where the Indomitus Crusade takes place. But that isn't the focus of the video. We're not discussing the history of 40k, we're focusing on how time itself works, and that requires a different approach because, unsurprisingly, it's complicated and not a one-rule-fits-all kind of deal. As a starting point, if you think of the film Interstellar, it works a little like that. Different planets experience time in different ways. And not only that, but specific events within the timeline have thrown people forwards and backwards in time, and some beings are effectively immortal, and the way that they view and experience time is different as a result. Beyond that, there are also places which effectively exist outside of the constraints of time. A little aside here, but I always think that immortal characters in media are the equivalent of Chekhov's gun, a narrative principle that can be boiled down to the idea that if you see a gun on stage, someone is going to get shot. Well, I think being described as immortal is a little like that. It makes that character far more likely to be killed. The Emperor of Mankind being a case in point, though I'll accept that he's not technically dead. I think that it's worth saying that for the majority of mankind living in the material world, time works as it does for us. But that brings us onto the concept of the warp. This is a parallel dimension to ours, otherwise known as the immaterium, and it's constructed of pure psychic energy. In 40k, ships can travel through the warp, allowing them to make faster than light journeys across space and time. There are huge rifts in the warp where dimensions collide. The Eye of Terror is one of the largest of these, and near to its epicenter lie Eldar craft worlds. They experience time differently because of their proximity to the rift. The warp is quite deliberately chaotic, and in truth that allows for it to be flexible from a narrative perspective. It's a vehicle that can be used to disrupt the passage of time if that's what's required in a story. In a similar vein, there are beings within the universe who have the power of premonition. They can see the future, or possible futures, depending on how far forwards they look. This foresight and its accuracy seem to be dependent on how powerful the individual that wields it is and how far ahead into the future they try to see. Time is not only used for prediction, but also as a weapon in 40k. The stories written in 40k tend to avoid focusing too much on time dilation and travel, because honestly, it's such a poorly executed and hard to manage concept in most media products that why would you? Plus, you've already got 40 millennia to work with. How necessary is time travel at that point? That's not to say that it doesn't happen, it just isn't a regular and integral facet of a lot of the narrative that's out there. There are, however, a group of Necrons known as Chronomancers who utilise their knowledge of arcane science to weaponize time on the battlefield, slowing down their enemies while hastening their allies. This tends to be restricted to quite localized applications, and my interpretation is this is a cool supportive gameplay mechanic more so than a key piece of lore. I think the best conclusion we can draw from all of this is that in 40k, time is fluid, and I mean that both literally and figuratively. It's fluid in the sense that it isn't fixed in the same way that it is for us. There are examples of time travel, there are beings that can see the future or manipulate time as a weapon, and there are places which experience time differently because of their location. It's also fluid in the sense that this flexibility allows the concept of time to be what it needs to be for an author writing within the universe. It doesn't tend to take centre stage, but equally it doesn't have to get in the way of a good story. With all that said, I think it's time to return to reality and briefly explore whether or not there has ever been a good Warhammer themed watch. I use the term brief there not because I want to, but because in all honesty there isn't much to speak of, and what there is has very little information available. There was at some point an unbranded sports watch made with the double eagle Aquila motif on the dial, but outside of a couple of Reddit posts I can find no real mention of it. There was also at some stage a pocket watch available via AliExpress, but that was very clearly unofficial and no longer listed. The best thing I found by far was a fan project using a Casio GA2100 and theming it, but again, that's not close to being an official licensed product. To my knowledge, and again I am happy to be corrected, I don't think Games Workshop have ever released a wristwatch. There is certainly clamour out there for one though. I came across plenty of AI mock-ups people have produced detailing how the theming could be done. Perhaps we should petition Henry Cavill to get one made. At any rate, unfortunately I think the answer is a definitive no in terms of has there ever been a good Warhammer themed watch. It's very much the case that if you want one, you're going to have to make it yourself or reach out on a platform like Etsy in the hopes that a craftsman can produce one. So, there we have it. Once again, a lot of fun for me to make, and hopefully you've enjoyed watching it. You might have noticed that the name of the playlist this belongs to has changed to Watches in Media. And on that note, I'll say that I've got videos put together relating to Final Fantasy and Pokemon watches, and if there have ever been any good ones, set to come out later this year. Those are a little different in concept to this and the Middle-earth video though, which both focus on how time works within fictional universes. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'd like to open the floor to suggestions. Are there any other worlds or media franchises that you'd like me to look into? Let me know in the comments section below, and I'd also appreciate any feedback on this video. If I'm going to try and make these every now and again, I want them to be as good as they can, and your feedback, positive or negative, is really helpful in achieving that. As ever, thank you for your time. If you've enjoyed what you've seen or found it informative, consider dropping the video a like and subscribing for more content like this in future.